Right then, good morning and welcome to the latest in our series of webinars from the guys at Rakbank Business and SME Souk. My name is Richard Dean. I'm a journalist with Dubai Eye and the Business Breakfast. We are broadcasting live from Dubai Eye studios this morning. Going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about the following topic: boost your bankability, looking at issues like money laundering, looking at legal issues, looking at credit risk issues, and helping you navigate these things more smoothly. Why are we doing this? Well, why do we do these webinars? It's because the guys at Rakbank Business speak to their clients. There are certain questions that come up time and time and time again. And when you get enough of those questions, they go, right, it's time to do a webinar on this. People clearly care about this, particularly those who are owners or managers of small businesses and medium-sized businesses here in the UAE. And that's why we have got the band back together this morning. We've got a couple of expert speakers for you. Let me just run you through the format if it's the first time on one of these webinars. It's about 45 minutes. We're not going to take too much time out of your day. We're going to begin with 5 minutes or so from each of our speakers this morning. And after that, it is open season for about 25 minutes, half an hour. You've got a question, just enter it on the chat function. We've all done lots of these webinars since COVID. Just enter it on the chat function and we'll throw it at our experts this morning. We've got two of them joining us this morning. We'll get to Nawaf Al-Darai from Rakbank in a second, but we are going to kick off with our guest this morning. Great to have a representative from one of the big four this morning. And we have a partner within financial crime and regulatory compliance at EY. It is a pleasure to have him with us this morning. I say a good warm welcome to Gopal Bang. Gopal, how are you?
Doing very well, Richard, and it's a pleasure, it's a privilege to be part of your session and also to share the panel with Noaf and just to share our insights on this very pertinent and a topical subject, which is close to a lot of individuals across the board.
Good stuff. Well, we've got about 5 minutes with you before we pass over to Nuaf. What I want you to do, just for a couple of minutes, is give us a bit of background. You've been doing this for about 2 decades now, if not more. If you can summarize those 2 decades in about 2 minutes, what wisdom can you share? What have you learned?
Absolutely, Richard. So, as you know, that I'm driving the financial crime and reg compliance practice across MENA, working very closely with a lot of financial institutions, banks, finance companies, driving a lot of transformation agendas in the space of financial crime as well as reg compliance practice. What we have seen, UAE as a financial ecosystem, it has evolved significantly. It is not a known fact that in terms of the bank has been undertaking a significant amount of scrutiny from the regulators. And I think the topic has been so pertinent that as we speak, we are having a national summit on financial crime compliance to be held in Abu Dhabi. Yesterday was the first day, and there has been a constant underlying tone from the regulatory body and the financial ecosystem that financial crime compliance and overall reg compliance will be the cornerstone of the growth of the UAE economy. And that is one of the key important things that collectively, as a participant in this financial ecosystem, each and every individual and each and every player has a specific role in making sure A, establishment of a robust, B, a resilient compliance framework in their specific day-to-day activities. Some of the things what we have seen an emerging part, and I'm sure that we are going to discuss more in detail, is there are some inherent and a structural challenges when it comes to the SME. But the fact is all those challenges are promoting those specific opportunities to not only improve the customer experience, but at the same point in time, comply with this applicable legislative and the supervisory expectations to make the overall economy as well as the community as resilient as we can able to do that.
Well, let's talk about 2024, the here and now, where we are today. What are the big issues for small and medium-sized companies here in the UAE? There are loads of issues. I've got a long list, you've got a long list, but what are the top ones that need to be front of mind for business owners and business managers?
This is a very relevant point, Richard. So the top three issues that any small and medium enterprises will face is number one, owing to their small size and the limited amount of the talent that they have to manage a plethora of those requirements, right from AML, right from business setup. Now we have corporate taxation compliance and the other regulatory reporting. And the second important thing is with regard to the change as well as the requirements, right from the business setup till the sustainability is something that they are going in rounds, and it is creating a significant amount of cost of compliance that they are grappling with. Now, I'm sure that the related point would be that with these challenges at an economy level, and I'm glad that you raised this point that around 2 weeks back, I was in one of the panel where we discussed about zero bureaucracy. Now, this particular point, which has been under the initiative of the UAE government, wherein they have inculcated zero bureaucracy initiatives right at the government services, but it has been cascaded down at a regulatory and thereafter also in the case of the financial community at large to make the customer experience, to make their interaction with those all the financial players in a seamless manner. And that's where the role and the specific innovative solutions what we have come across like fintech, blockchain, and the AI ML came into the picture, which will A, improve the customer experience, B, make their life easier in terms of their service touch point with any of the banking participant, more focus on their core activities.
Gopal, zero bureaucracy. That is my kind of world. I hope we get there sooner
Yeah.
rather than later. And finally, just
Yeah.
before we move on to Nuaf, let me ask you a question about the future. Those are your top three today in 2024. I suspect if we'd been speaking 5 years ago, they would be slightly different. And they will be different again in another 5 years. Change is constant. So if we throw forward, what are some of the things on the horizon that small business owners and managers need to think about in terms of boosting your bankability, in terms of compliance?
100%. So I think, Richard, the top three elements that all the SMEs, particularly, they need to focus upon it. A, in order to maintain, because the compliance requirements will be ever evolving. The entire landscape is getting complex and evolving and changing every single day. Important thing is how they need to maintain their specific bandwidth in terms of catering to those needs. So number one is SMEs are not required to set up the full legal or the infrastructure like any of the large corporate. They need to undertake the retainers kind of a support to make sure those requirements are being met. Second important thing is in terms of the technology. There are a lot of fintechs at a cost-effective solutions that can assist them in making sure the entire value chain and the business models are made simpler and resilient to cater to the demands. And the third and the most important thing is be absolutely transparent and cooperative as far as the disclosure of the information, whether you are dealing with a regulatory body, a licensing authority, or even a financial institution.
Thanks very much indeed, Gopal, for that. Stick around because we're already getting questions in. But now I want to move on to a banking perspective. We've got with us today from Rakbank, Noaf Al Darai. Noaf, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, good morning, Richard.
Hey, Noaf, Executive Vice President and Head of Business Banking Distribution at Rakbank. Again, my question to you, Noaf, just in terms of prioritizing issues, when you speak to your customers, as you do all the time, what are the front of mind issues for them within this broad boost your bankability compliance sphere?
Well, I think one of the challenges that they face is understanding the requirements from the bank side. So, there's a lot of regulation and a lot of things that happen in the background that they may not be aware of. For example, when we approach our customers, sometimes they're not fully understanding why we're asking the questions that we're asking. It's very important to educate them on the bank's regulatory requirements and making it as easy as possible for them to get that understanding.
This world of zero bureaucracy that Gopal talked about. I mean, it's a lovely idea, isn't it, Nawaf? I'm not sure we're 100% there yet, but is that the kind of thing that you're aspiring to and working towards? At least have it as an aspirational goal.
Yeah, 100%. We look to work with the regulators as well as licensing authorities to make the customers' lives easier in the sense of data sharing, obviously with the customer's consent, and being able to make that journey a little bit smoother for them.
So in terms of the regulatory environment, the things that you as a bank ask your small and medium-sized business customers to do, and some of them, and you've told me there is sometimes pushback. Do I really need to do this? But they do need to do it. Partly as a bank, you'll help, but it is on the small business, isn't it?
Yes, it's definitely there. I think one of the best advices that I could give to an SME is just when you're intending to open an account, it's very important to be as transparent in terms of your business dealings and the counterparties that you plan and intend on dealing with, because that will reduce the friction in terms of the bank asking those questions. Because if we have that information with us, then we don't have to ask that question.
So, Noaf, if we can bring it back to the subject of this webinar, which is to boost your bankability. And you've sent me some notes under the heading, the benefits of being compliant. And again, thinking of the small and medium-sized business company owners and managers who are on this webinar, they want to know what's in it for me. So what's the payoff, the trade-off for boosting things like your AML, for boosting things like your compliance, for boosting things like your risk management? What is the payoff?
Well, I believe that the biggest payoff is just maintaining a good relationship with your banks, right? The worst thing that you can have happen to you is receive a notice from the bank saying that we're going to shut down your account, and it could be for the most trivial thing. So I believe it's important to understand what from a compliance perspective, the bank's perspective, what's needed, and just being as transparent as possible in terms of the your business dealings.
We're getting lots of questions in already, so let me get to those. And just to remind you, it's in the chat function on the Zoom call. Just write your questions in there. We're keeping an eye on them. The guys at Rakbank are keeping an eye on them, so they're already coming in. Thank you very much indeed. But maybe, Noaf, if I can briefly frame it in a very simplistic journalistic perspective, in terms of carrots and sticks. So in terms of sticks, people have to carry out this compliance and all these things because, as you say, if they don't, ultimately the bank account will be closed down. But in terms of carrots, I'm thinking, for example, if you boost your bankability, will it increase your access to credit? Will it make you a more attractive person, or not person, a more attractive company for a bank or other lender to grant funds to? Will it perhaps even help you to get terms that are a little bit more preferential? I mean, we can't draw a direct line between this and lower interest rates, much as we'd like to. But talk to me about some of the carrots.
So some of the carrots is obviously the continuity of your operations with the bank that I would say is first and foremost. It's just very important to have a clear understanding of that business, and as you rightfully stated, that rolls into the bank being more willing to extend those credit facilities. Uh, and also, look to strengthen that relationship. So, obviously, AML is a very important aspect in the full scheme of things.
If I can turn to you, Gopal, on this question, under this general heading of the benefit of being compliant, you've worked with a lot of companies, and I'm
Yeah.
sure they have different levels of compliance. Some companies are better than this than others. What are the benefits of for the companies that are compliant and get this right? Can you give me some, if not specific examples? Obviously, you've signed non-disclosure agreements, but some examples of the payoff, the trade-off.
No, absolutely. I think, Richard, in my past life as well, I do accompany some of the bankers in the site visits of some of these small and medium enterprises. And when I used to interact with the owners, A, to understand what is the line of business, visiting their warehouse, I was completely amazed to see that A, they have been so transparent. B, the moment when you make a site visit, they take you to the entire business model. When we will come back to our offices within the banking domain, and thereafter we'll say that look, he is doing the right thing. And that, number one, will open up a lot of other product and services, obviously within the risk profile of that particular customer. B, to put within the risk parameters, those specific customers are being treated fairly so that they are not being under significant amount of intense scrutiny as well as asking a lot of information, because the due diligence requirements are commensurate with the underlying risk that you perceive and you assess. So the customers are being ask some bare and baseline information. Number two, they get a host of other access to the information based on the underlying credit risk. Number three, they are being protected from the legal consequences, because bear in mind, licensed financial institutions are globally integrated. We have also been responsible to our correspondent banks. If there is anything which is suspicious or untoward, those LFIs or those entities' names could be added into that black/adverse media list. So all the specific legislative measures, asking specific questions, is to protect our clients as well as LFIs and the financial ecosystem at large.
Okay, questions coming in. Let me go to a few of them now if I can. Gopal, I'm going to throw this one at you. No name on it, but what steps can my SME take to ensure compliance with KYC, know your customer regulations? I said there's no name on that. I'm wrong. It's from Neha. Neha, thanks very much indeed. Gopal, KYC.
Yes, absolutely. I think which is a majority is a pain point, but it's an absolutely essential for a lot of SMEs, because in the case of KYC, know your customers, important thing is A, to understand the identity, and B, the verification. And here the education as well as raising the awareness that what are the key specific information that you need to disclose upfront. And now here, the role on the LFIs, which is a licensed financial institutions, as well as again coming back to the manager at small and medium enterprises to understand that, look, when it comes to the KYC, your trade license, your passport, and your Emirates ID for your signatories and UBOs are absolutely critical to maintain and to provide a periodic update. Now, these are specific elements, as well as during the course of it, what you disclose that, look, this is my profile, these are the customers, these are the counterparties that I'm dealing with. If there is a change, proactively update it to the LFIs. That will reduce the amount of checkpoints that a financial institution will have with those specific clients. And that will make both sides educated and up to date in terms of the requirements.
Noah, if I can just pick up on Neha's question about KYC and ask for your perspective on this. You and your team obviously process an awful lot of applications for a new account, applications for loan, many, many other interactions with clients where KYC is needed. And I'm sure most clients get it and they comply, but there will be challenges, there'll be bottlenecks, there'll be hurdles, times when this is an issue. What are some of the bottlenecks or hurdles that you sometimes see? And what advice would you give to business owners and managers to spot those in advance, to see them coming, to avoid them in the first place?
Yeah, so to kind of go on add to what Gopal was saying, I think it's very important. See, for us as a bank, we don't only look at the regulator itself, but obviously we have correspondent banking relationships that we have to be considerate of. And I think it's, due diligence from a banking perspective in getting that KYC information. I think for an SME to kind of understand what the bank's expectation is also having internal checks as well on their counterparties and understanding who they're dealing with and being able to supply that information to the bank, fully understanding their relationships and in being transparent with the bank on those relationships. Because a lot of the times what will happen is the KYC information will be given on the customer's profile, and then a week later we're asking questions on basically who are you dealing with, and if it's not in the KYC profile, then we have to ask that question. So I think it's very important to have that information readily available with the bank at from the onset of the relationship.
Thanks very much indeed. Let's move on now to financial reporting, if we can. Lots of questions on this. Let me throw one from Nick at you. It's a specific question, but I think he makes a general point about financial reporting. Nick says, I run a small bakery out of a cloud kitchen here in the UAE. Sounds delicious. Breakfast time's just finished, Nick. But anyway, keep us in mind. But no, more seriously, Nick says, are there any specific financial reporting obligations that my business needs to meet to stay compliant? Gopal, your thoughts on that, first of all, financial reporting compliance in particular.
Yeah, so I think, Richard, this all depends upon which of the licensing authority that individual or that entity has been registered. But absolutely, there is a common theme across all the licensing authorities, whether it is a free zone, whether it is a DIFC based, or even in the case of Dubai Economic Department, where there are specific reportings, in terms of change in the customer mix, B, in terms of any of the ownership changes that have taken place, and number three is in terms of anything in any specific counterparties that they are dealing with. They need to be reported. Now, each of this reporting varies from license authority to license authority. And just to add to that, at a more macro level, even the regulator is making initiative again with an overarching zero bureaucracy theme to harmonize this specific reporting requirements so that to have a single viewpoint about some of the critical data points as far as compliance is concerned. But from the small bakery shop having a small size enterprise, the specific requirements will be bare minimum, which is applicable to the licensing authority where the license has been obtained.
I'll just
No,
jump in here, Gopal. Sorry,
Yeah.
Dheeraj from Rakbank. So on the compliance requirement, you have three set of requirement. One imposed by the trade licensing authority, one by the tax authorities. So for example, VAT, you have exemption up to 375, and the corporate tax, you have exemption up to 375 of net profit. But the audited books requirement is only when you achieved a turnover of 50 million in a financial year. So you have to keep books of records, definitely for VAT and tax and the trade licensing purposes. But whether it should be audited differs to authority to authority. And as far as corporate income tax is concerned, the mandatory requirement is only when you have achieved the turnover of 50 million for audited books of account. Thank you.
Is that 1515?
5050.
50. So up until that, I guess QuickBooks will be what a lot of small to medium-sized companies are using. That's okay. And Noah, I'd throw that question at you as well in terms of how good is good enough in terms of the financial reporting of the company. It was Nick the baker, wasn't it, who was saying what level of financial reporting do I need? Is QuickBooks enough? Does it, even if you don't need an audit, if you're not at 550 million, does an audit help? Will that make Nick or any other business more bankable if they get an audit?
Definitely. And also, annual audit is beneficial for any company, even smaller size SMEs. And there are some audit firms that they're out there that, have some pretty good pricing. But yeah, maintaining that is important, as well as if you're going to consider on lending in the future as well. Maintaining that record is very, it would be to their benefit for sure.
Okay, so that kind of answers Ashwin's question already, Noah. If he says, how often should my SME perform an audit to ensure compliance with banking regulations? But you say an audit, even if you don't need one for regulations, because you're below 50 million dirhams a year, you think once a year to get an audit is money well spent.
Yeah, for sure. And it's good housekeeping at the end of the day.
Okay, good to know. Thanks very much indeed. Right, let's move on. Irina's written in about cross-border compliance. Irina writes the following: are there any particular compliance requirements for SMEs when dealing with cross-border transactions? Gopal, can I throw this one at you?
Absolutely. So I think, Richard, yes, there are specific requirements, and that's where from a compliance perspective, the sanctions and money laundering comes into the picture. Now, there are specific countries within the AML legislation as well as within the UAE law that there are certain countries and there are certain individuals within those countries. If those are sanctioned, then any remittances, any transfers would be blocked, and accordingly, the transaction will not proceed. At the same time, if there are any transactions, any facilitation of counterparties, or in the case of customer that you are dealing with, which are not in line with the profile that you have disclosed at the time of customer onboarding, that also raises a significant amount of red flags, and where the request for information customer touch point will come into the picture. So it is absolutely important that with whom you are dealing with, it is critical to know them very well rather than having those specific inconveniences that you will deal in the case of the cross-border remittances or facilitation of those transfers.
And Noah, from your perspective as well, I'm sure you deal with of course, you deal with a lot of UAE-based small businesses, but who are operating overseas. Are there any particular requirements that you have in terms of compliance for people who are operating overseas? Is it different from a services company to a product company importing physical goods in practice? What do you see with cross-border? What are the common issues, Nuaf, for you and your team?
Oh.
Cross-border transactions do come under a lot more scrutiny than local transfers for sure, because we have our correspondents that are also processing the transactions on behalf of the bank. I think probably one of my best advices is to sanctions data is open source, so it's very easy to find out whether a new counterparty that you're dealing with comes under the radar of sanctions. So, a simple search on the name in Google can bear you some results to make sure that you're not dealing with the wrong kind of counterparty that can result in, additional questions. Worst case scenario, account gets exited, and as well as, like Gopal had mentioned earlier, the banks will blacklist your name in their database, whether that's the correspondent itself or the bank itself. So it's very important to understand who are the counterparties that you're dealing with, because we've seen it where customers are very genuine customers, but just by one transaction, it can have a very negative impact on their banking services.
Okay, here we go. 28 minutes in, and someone's thrown the artificial intelligence grenade into the room. So here we go. Vidura is the person who's done this. What role does technology such as AI and automation play in strengthening the compliance process in the SME sector? Gopal, you could write a PhD on that over 5 years and still not have an answer. But can you give me a quick headline thought for Vidura on AI and how, if at all, it changes this issue?
Absolutely. I think, Richard, it's a pretty fascinating topic about AI and its use cases across the board, and financial services and SME segment is not an exception. Some of the key use cases which I can outline is, and where we have seen some real life examples, is that owing to the plethora of the requirements, like the way Dheeraj and Noah just outlined, whether it is from an AML perspective, whether it is from a reporting perspective, whether it is VAT, or whether it's a corporate taxation, there are some specific use cases that, based on the underlying law and regulation, they will just going to decode each one of them, put them in a workflow management, give it to you in a simpler manner. What are the specific requirements that as an SME you need to undertake? They undertake the scheduling for you, that which are the reporting that they need to do, put a predefined reminders to the SME like, look, the report is due now, please start working on it. So these are the specific use cases where I've seen the SME from a rec compliance and from an overarching compliance perspective, they have a significant amount of a seamless as well as a very efficient process. But from the other specific one, where we have seen how the SME sector and it's interlinked with regard to the LFIs are in terms of the documentation. As you can imagine, and I will dovetail this particular question to the earlier one in terms of the cross-border remittances, wherein there are plethora of documents, whether it's a trade finance related, whether it's an LC that an SME will provide to the bank, and they need to punch those data points into a portal or into the OCR with a deep learning in terms of the specific ask is where they include that how the data points are pre-populated, making the life on both the sides easier.
Noah, similar question to you, AI, when it comes to compliance. Is it a game changer yet? Might it be in the future? What are you seeing? Noah, if I can't hear you at the moment, maybe you're on mute.
Sorry, Richard. It's still very much at its early stages. I believe that there are a lot of benefits in terms of the compliance operations on the back end. But what I look forward to kind of leveraging the aid from the AI perspective is honestly a faster onboarding, faster credit assessment. So I think we're still ways away from it, but I believe that within the next probably 3 to 5 years we'll start bearing the fruits of AI.
Let's move on. We've got about 10 minutes left. Keep your messages coming. They are coming in thick and fast. Thank you very much indeed for that. Again, just use the chat function within Zoom and we'll get to as many questions as we can. We've got an interesting one in from, is it Philip? I think it is. Yeah, this is from Philip. Very honest from Philip. Says, what are the risks of non-compliance with UAE banking regulations for my business? And here's the honest bit from Philip. He says, we haven't paid enough attention to this over the years, but we are now being more structured in our approach. It's an auto spare parts business that Philip runs. Gopal, this is an interesting one. Advice to a company that's been getting away with it for a few years, wants to get a bit more structured now. And sometimes when you're in that situation, you can be quite nervous because you're worried what you might find. What advice can you give to Philip, Gopal?
So I think, Richard, the way I would like to structure the response to Philip would be that this kind of customers are really something that all the financial institutions would love to interact with when they are more proactive in structuring their entire compliance framework. One important thing is that they need to undertake that if there is any specific where they are not compliant with, the consequences from an LFI perspective is they will work with them, but eventually we have seen cases where there are some non-responsive, non-cooperative customers where the LFIs de-risk them, which is a major, major blow to any of the SME business as such. Now, to ensure that, yes, there has been a very systemic as well as a robust framework, number one is they need to work very closely with the RMs or with the unit heads with whom they are interacting. Because bear in mind, with regard to the overarching transformative approach that what we have seen across the UAE banking sector, the RMs are the extended arm of compliance when they interact with the customer, who not only educate, but even raise the awareness of that point number one, you need to maintain your end-to-end KYC information. Number two, you need to maintain your customer profile or your transaction profile that you have disclosed at the time of onboarding. Number three, has there been any change in your line of business, in the line of the customers or the counterparties you are dealing with? Please proactively inform us so that our systems are appropriately being calibrated to those specific change in information so that we do not have to raise any red flags and thereafter make your inconvenience in terms of come to the branch, provide this documentation, provide these data points. So these are some of the unique aspects that I think are critical to ensure that there is a very collaborative relationship between a client as well as the financial institution.
Just before I throw that question to Noaf, Gopal, for Philip, who knows that the compliance isn't perfect at the moment, Would it be better for Philip to speak to an outside firm of accountants and say, look, I'm going to go to my bank because we want X, Y, Z, and to get themselves ready before they approach the bank? Or should they just go straight to the bank and say, look, here we go. Can you help me become more bankable? What approach would
100%.
you, sorry?
Yes, Philip. So absolutely. So I will definitely go with the second approach where the Philip will directly go to the banker, because what I have seen and in my interaction with a lot of RMs, they are well versed of in terms of what are the requirements from a KYC and from a compliance perspective that make them more bankable, that make them more conducive for any of the financial institutions in terms of how much of robust data and the information that they share. Because bear in mind, yes, accountants or company service providers, they have a certain amount of information, there is no doubt about it, but an up-to-date and pertinent information to specific line of business is also critical. Now here, Richard, I also wanted to outline is, for example, there will be specific requirements for dealers in precious metals versus the real estate brokers versus a general trading company. So each one of them will have a specific requirement for each of the financial institution that a banker slash RM would be having a more extensive access rather than an accountant or a service provider.
Okay, that's good to know. Numaf, maybe you can pick up on this. The fact that the RM, I guess sometimes small business owners they worry that the RM is out to get them, that they're looking for flaws and faults. But from what Gopal was saying, the RM can actually have maybe a hand-holding role as well, understand the business, and help companies go from C to A in terms of being bankable. Not quite bankable when that first relationship happens, but helping them to go through the steps to become bankable. Can the RM help them do that?
Yeah, definitely. That is something that the RM should be helping them get a view on how they can be bankable, because there's a lot of legacy companies out there that instead of invoicing, it's more of a handshake, and you can see that they're doing business at the end of the day. But it's very important for those companies to kind of come up to speed with what the requirements are today, making sure that they're continuously processing those invoices, making sure that all their books are kind of in line. So yeah, RM can definitely give them a view in terms of how to better structure this within their organization, and give them some cues and guidance in where they should be um, where they should be getting this help. But yeah, for sure.
Okay, we got loads of questions coming in now. We're running short of time, so I'm going to do fairly rapid fire questions and fairly rapid fire answers if possible. And they're all related, to be honest. For example, we've got this one in from Hatum saying, how can a company ensure that the bank knows us as a customer or a company when there's sometimes a huge gap of communication? Sometimes there's no possibility for personal chat. Sometimes we have virtual customer relationship managers these days. That's not a specific criticism of Rakbank. That's not the point at all. It's just a general comment on relationships between companies and banks in a digital age. Noaf, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so us as a bank, we know, we do push for the digital initiative for sure. But we always try to keep that human touch in everything that we do. So, we can understand that, having VRMs and certain banks may have that issue of getting in contact with people, but it's a continuous kind of view on the bank to enhance the overall service for the customer, and that's a very core area for Rakbank.
I got a question from Asma here. It's a bit of a free hit for you, Nawaf and Dirash, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. God, you deserve an easy question. What are the key considerations I need to consider for my SME when selecting a bank that meets compliance and regulatory standards? Go on, Nawaf. This is your moment to shine.
Um, Sorry, could you repeat that
Yeah, the
exactly?
question is, what are the key considerations that my SME needs to look at when selecting a bank?
Okay, key considerations is one, the ease of banking, obviously, digital banking, and how the ease of doing a transaction. That's one, and as well as very much the service. Like going back to the previous question, you know, having that RM available when you need him. You know, with the digital age nowadays, you know, we're doing our best to create an experience where the customer doesn't really need to speak to the RM unless they need a additional product. So, but yeah, definitely when that requirement does come, that service is available to them.
Gopal,
I
if I
think
could,
that, sorry,
oh, Diraj, go on. Yeah.
yeah, I said, this is not a multiple choice question. There is only one option called Rakbank. It's a very easy one. Yeah. I've been noting some of the questions. So if you have a couple of minutes, I just wanted to share my thoughts.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
please
it
do. Yeah.
okay?
In fact, we
Yeah.
were we were going to ask you to wrap up with some concluding remarks.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
yeah. So, a lot of times when we do risk management discussion with our fellow SMEs, which remains central part of what we do at Rakbank, there has always been a disproportionate focus to manage credit risk. And by design credit risk, all the businesses, they know how to collect their money. So that risk is always taken care of either by bank or SME largely, right? But what risk is generally not attended to is the risk which is not going to hurt you today, but can hurt you later. So not knowing your customer can have your $1 million of shipment done, but payment stuck because you don't know your customer from whether from compliance reason or the fraud reason. Sometimes you don't pay enough attention while drafting your contract with your supplier. It can land up you in problems. Sometimes not complying to the law of land is something that can land you in problems. Because they don't land you in problem today, we tend to ignore them. So please don't. Always see compliance expenditure is not a cost, it's an investment to make your business sustainable. It's not a
Oh, I
cost,
like that.
right?
Compliance is not a cost, it's an investment.
Right, for sustainability that everyone is trying to achieve. Self-governance is the best governance. Even a two people company needs to govern itself, that what is right and what is not right. And more importantly, you have to distinguish your personal account from your corporate account, which was not needed till yesterday because you're not a tax regime. Now you're a tax regime. So you have to split your entertainment vouchers now. Lastly, basic risk like don't put all your eggs in one basket, whether it's one buyer, whether it's one supplier. God forbid, nothing should happen to all of us, but you should plan for rainy days, you should plan for succession. And as a bank, thankfully, we are not fully digital, so we still have human touch left, and we are welcome to help our customers. Do write to us. We are available at public domain. There are enough channels to reach out to us, and we are happy to help. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much indeed, Duresh Kunwa there from Rakbank Business. Listen, we're going to wrap up there. Just one last question that I've got from Nicholas, who's written in saying, it's about SME Souk. Are there tools or approved service providers available to small businesses on SME Souk to help with compliance? Noah, a quick word on that on SME Souk.
I think Dheeraj would probably be better to answer that question.
So currently we don't have specific for compliance, but we do have tools for accounting. We do have tools for tax advisory. We do have tools for B2B deals. But compliance becomes a very very specific function, and we don't want to take the legal ownership of advising something which can go wrong. So that's why there's a very fine line between what we advise and what we can't. What we advise is what is right in the banking landscape, but what we can't advise in our banking capacity is what is right for your business.
Two final questions just to conclude here, and I'm going to throw this one at Gopal and also at Nawaf on this one. Rob writes in, very simple question. What are the most critical critical factors that lenders look at when assessing the bankability of SMEs. That's the heart and soul of why we're here today, boosting your bankability. Nuaf, an answer for Rob and others who've asked a similar question. The critical factors in terms of bankability.
So obviously, we there's quite a few factors that goes into a credit assessment, but obviously looking at it holistically, um, looking at if the company is maintaining a healthy amount of balances, making sure that their account turnover is healthy. Looking at their business setup, making sure that they have the proper setup for the type of business that they're doing. So yeah, so there's quite a few factors.
And Gopal, a question to you from Gopal. Gopal M asks the question: there's lots of brokers and intermediaries out there between the company and the bank. And Gopal wants to know what measures are in place to manage this. A quick final word from you, Gopal, on brokers and intermediaries between the small business and the bank. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So, Ministry of Economy, they have been mandated to manage and to supervise these brokers, what we call either from a real estate or from a company service providers. Now, that's where they also mentioned that look, these are some of the brokers who act as an advisor to a lot of SMEs, in terms of their setup and also in terms of setting up their regulatory frameworks as such. Now, to ensure that they provide the right advice and whether they are capable enough to undertake such an activity, where Ministry of Economy, as a part of its supervisory framework, they have conducted around 3,000 such entities as a totality of that they have around 15,000 last year, and they will continue to monitor this. Now, and we need to be absolutely critical that an SME with whom we are dealing with, whether those individuals are been operative in this country for a long point of time, they have been reviewed, registered within the Ministry of Economy, and their vintage in terms of delivering such services. So these are some of the key considerations that the SME should take into account.
Diraj, I'm going to ask you to wrap up now, although maybe Diraj has had to go because I have gone over by 3 minutes. Diraj Kumar, are you still with us on the call?
Yes, I'm still around.
Hey,
And thank you.
Diraj.
I think a discussion very well conducted. I just wanted to say thanks to you, Gopal and Nuaf, and the team from both sides who could set up. But again, this is the norm. This is the engagement we definitely want to have with our customers. It's not about banking. It's just about how do we make a sustainable partnership. And if our customers are well served, if customer is thriving, then we thrive as a result, right? So from my final takeaway from this discussion would be, your records, either your books of account or your bank statement, are your report cards, right? Sometimes when you don't give enough attention to your report card, it becomes too little and too late to walk into a parent-teacher meeting, right? So we also have a fiduciary relationship to advise, but you have to come back in time so that we can do course correction, and we are always welcome. And again, at the very end, thank you to all our customers who dialed in, and thank you to our presenters.
Thanks very much indeed. Diraj Kunwar there, Diraj Kunwar, Managing Director, Business Banking at Rakbank, and also to our speakers today, to Gopal Bang, Partner at EY, and also to Nawaf Al-Darai, who is the Executive Vice President and Head of Business Banking Distribution at Rakbank. From myself, Richard, at the Dubai Eye headquarters, really appreciate your time today. Thanks to everyone who took time to log on today, and thanks for all your questions. Really do appreciate them. And we'll see you at the next webinar from SMA Souk and Rakbank Business.